Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have Katya and Noel from the Sunlight office, as well as some of our other Sunlight friends who are on the line, who are leading in office hours on technical data engagement. So if you can, please place yourself on mute if you're joining by phone, or hit the mute button in the Zoom app. And I think that they'll be taking some questions a little later on, so hang on to those until they open up for questions. And I will pass off to Katya and Noel.
Not getting any protests, so I assume everyone can hear us fine.
Yes.
I'm Katya Abazajian. I'm also an analyst on the Open Cities team.
Well, already for those who aren't. And we focus on using the tools of city people, policy analysis to help improve government open data, means sustainable open data. In our work, we actually come to realize that there's more open data.
Oh, sorry, they're having trouble hearing. So let's I wonder if we can get closer.
Yes.
Is this helping at all?
Can we hear me now?
Yes, that's much better. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll skip a little bit of the intro that we had, but right now, actually, we're just talking about the new and enhanced approach towards open data that we developed here at Sunlight called tactical data engagement. At its essence, tactical data engagement is an approach to help cities put data in the hands of residents and stakeholders who will use it to create a positive community impact. In our work with cities, we worked about 52 cities and helped develop 4 foundational practices around open data, developing a policy which provides a framework for an open data program, and then also a portal which provides access for residents to the city's open data. What we found though is that cities didn't really have strategies beyond putting the data out there, so to speak. And so we thought really long and hard about this, and we wanted to figure out a way to directly connect citizens to open data, directly connect residents to open data and make them relevant to their lives, and to also foster community impact. So in doing so, we developed tactical data engagement, and we did some research around previous efforts around open data. We developed a data guide that we released in March.
Hey, Noel, I'm so sorry. Can we hold for 1 second? Because I don't think anyone is able to hear you right now again.
Oh, yes. Can you hear me now? Moved a little bit closer, a lot closer.
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
All right, cool. So, after we conducted a lot of research around community activities around open data and how other efforts the cities have used to make open data more impactful in the lives of their residents, we developed an approach called tactical data engagement, which we wrote down and put up in a guide that we released in March, and we sought feedback from all of you in the Work Cities community and others. And thank you for doing so. And we're now actually upgrading the guide now and releasing a new version pretty soon. So in the previous efforts that we've seen, we noticed certain things that cities have done to help enhance the open data program. So for example, cities have hosted events like hackathons. Another way cities have done enhanced the open data programs include resident-informed open data activities like mayor's challenges. And another way that cities have used that as well is to focus on specific subject areas like homelessness or transportation. Use that as an opportunity to apply open data to help solve issues amongst the citizens.
So what is tactical data engagement? Just to check if everyone can hear me okay?
We're still having trouble hearing both of you. Can we
Okay.
hold for a second, and maybe can you guys try calling into the phone line?
Sure. Let me try that.
Let's hold for just one more minute because I don't want to miss any of this.
Okay. Let's do this.
She muted herself. Okay, good.
Can everybody hear us better now?
I think so. Why don't we try that? I will let you know if we can't hear
Okay.
you.
Okay. I'm going to pick up where we left off. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail about tactical data engagement because we want this to be really useful for the cities on the line and make sure that everyone has a clear idea of what the process is and how you can use it. So that's what this section is going to be focused on. Tactical data engagement as a process has 4 concrete steps that we hope can be adapted to any city, no matter what their capacity is, no matter what resources you have, and no matter where you're starting from as far as open data. These 4 steps, I'll just walk through them really quickly, and then we'll go into more detail in the later slides. The first step is finding opportunities for community reuse of public information. So that means getting a general idea of what issues might be important to people who are interested in making progress in their communities and figuring out and starting to think about how open data might factor into those challenges. The second step is refining that opportunity, so exploring those specific issues that people have within, say, housing, and focusing in on, too many vacant units on my block, or something like my housing is too far away from transportation options, specific problems that people have with regards to the issue area that you identified in the previous step, and exploring those scenarios by getting more detail. The third step is to plan, so to work alongside residents in developing a plan for how to address that specific issue. And the final step is implementation, so supporting a specific reuse scenario by carrying out the plan that you've developed and taking targeted steps towards fixing what you are aiming to fix using open data in your community. A small note, so the asterisk on this slide is that this process is iterative. It's intended to be tactical and lightweight so that you can address a small issue like what we've identified and do it again with a different issue, or do it again with different stakeholders, or do it again with a different strategy. So the idea is that this should be an actionable thing that you can take back with you to do in the short term, and then slowly build towards progress where in the long term, you're engaging with people regularly and you have a lot of channels as far as options for what to do with open data in your community. And another piece of this caveat is that each one of these steps, it includes community, and that's pretty central to the approach. We think that there are creative ways to include residents in each one of these steps, and part of what we like about this approach is that it allows you to be creative and kind of move things around however it suits your city in a way that in each step will incorporate community input. So I've mentioned a little bit the essence of what a tactical strategy is to carry out these steps. And one thing we've done in developing our guide that Noel mentioned and in helping cities kind of think through what it would look like in their city is define these tactics, which are lightweight, repeatable strategies that other cities have used, and we've categorized so that they address each one of the steps. So these tactics should be able to carry you through this process and be kind of implementable strategies that you can actually use in order to go through the process. The first finding tactics are supposed to help you find a focus area, so that's how to go into the community and look for the right opportunities. Refining tactics are strategies for helping you narrow down that opportunity, so how to have more detailed discussions with people. The third planning tactics are how to involve residents in co-creating a plan, how to have meetings that do that well, and where to go in order to meet residents in that goal. And finally, implementation tactics are strategies that you can use that actually make good use of open data in residents' hands. And we've seen other cities kind of take on these strategies as a way to, in an impactful way, where open data has been used in the community actively in this implementation step to help residents generate some kind of new impact in their community. So going a little bit more in detail about what these steps and what they might look like. Finding the opportunity, so the more general kind of exploration step, it means finding the right questions to explore with tactical data engagement. And it really requires just listening to outside stakeholders and identifying the common threads or general issue areas that they care about. So the outcome of doing this should be a focus area, so something that you notice people are generally concerned about that might be worth delving into more, and that ideally aligns with your city's strategic goals. For example, if you are thinking about exploring opportunities for ways that data could play a part in the community, and you go to a community meeting and most of the speakers that are walking up to the podium keep referencing water quality, maybe that's a sign to you that water quality is an important issue, and that's a good place to start for your first attempt at doing tactical data engagement. Some tactics for finding those opportunities, so how to identify that water quality is an important issue, is exploring where the city has important relationships. So more specifically, that means talking to your nonprofit partners, talking to your contractors, looking at each of those partnerships and seeing what issues they're centered around, or asking them what issues are most important to them if they have a pulse of what's going on in the community. Another tactic is analyzing public feedback channels. So what we mean by that is analyzing 311 data sets, analyzing requests for data sets on your open data portal, or even just talking to people who have informal channels of communication with the city and finding out what they're generally asking for in their repeated attempts to contact the city. And finally, another tactic is talking to groups of concerned residents. So in our example, that was going to a community meeting or a council meeting where people are voicing concerns and just listening to the issues that people are raising. This is just a sampling of the tactics that we provide in more detail in the guide, but it's just to get you thinking about how this step might actually look in your city. The second step is refining those promising opportunities into something more specific, into an opportunity, like a very, very refined opportunity. So that means narrowing your internal plan based on the public feedback that you've kind of gathered more generally in the previous step. And it requires that you collect more specific stories about stakeholder needs. So you need to know what is people's experience with data and what have they been using it for. And the goal will be to frame those specific scenarios of how open data might be used in the community by finding out how they could or have used your data in the past. An outcome of this step would be an opportunity statement that suggests a specific opportunity in the community and provides a stated goal. For example, going back to our water quality example, it means talking to those advocates for public health and safety maybe, and asking them what they're worried about and what they want the city to do and how open data might play a part in that. So maybe the result of those conversations is that water quality advocates, you find out that they're worried about measuring pollution and helping the city to prioritize the replacement of water infrastructure. So that's both a resource for the city and an opportunity to hear a really, really pressing concern from the community. Some tactics to do to carry out this step, if it's not obvious to you where to start or if you're not quite sure how to do it, convene a wide range of stakeholders just to get more detail about a specific issue. So some people are familiar with stakeholder mapping exercises. This is where you would make that list of stakeholders, make sure that everyone who's included needs to be included, and invite them to a focus group about your issue area and suss out what those specific issues are that you can actually address and work with them on. A second tactic is surveying data requesters about their needs. So if you analyze public feedback channels in the first step, looking at 311, for example, you might reach out to people who frequently provide requests to 311 services and ask them whether better information might help them address their concerns better in the future by interviewing them and doing a really concerted outreach strategy. And third, you could meet with your organizational partners to identify potential activities. So that means, convening your contractors or going to the university and talking to researchers and figuring out whether they have an idea of a specific issue that is important to the community and that you can move forward on. The third step is planning together with community members. So this step is about planning and maintaining those feedback loops that you established in the first two steps. This essentially just means that you want to have a plan of action. You want for that plan of action to include details like which interventions you're going to take on, which resources you're going to apply, and whose roles will be what. And that is something that you can do alongside the community, and we actually suggest that communities be involved in the co-creation of that draft plan if possible. So it's very important to make sure that plan is checked with the community so that you know whether or not it's actually going to work before you go through all the effort of trying to solve a problem and then find out that it actually doesn't work for the people who you wanted to help. So the outcome of this step should be a community-approved plan of action. And an example, coming back to our water quality example, is that the city maybe drafts a plan with advocates in the room, and they establish a plan moving forward to have community problem-solving sessions through a work group. And advocates think that's a really good idea because they can have consistent input in the city's strategy, but also because that allows the city to release ongoing data, new updates in data, or bring different statistics to every meeting. So maybe that's the route that you choose to pursue, and it's checked by the advocates and they agree that it's a good route. So strategies for co-creating a plan. You can share the draft plan out at standing community meetings. So that means maybe going to zoning hearings or going to council meetings or going to libraries, just places where people already are. And you can ask for feedback on the draft plan that you put together. You can check with your organizational partners for feasibility. So people who know the issue, like researchers, and ask them whether your plan to do this for the community would actually be something that would move the needle on issues that they are studying. Or you could interview stakeholders for plan adjustments. So again, do one-to-one outreach with people who you've had communication with, whether that's data requesters or just experts in the field who could contribute to making this a little bit more ground truth in reality. The last step, once you have that community plan, is to implement that plan around the specific opportunities that you've identified. So this is really the culmination of all of your work, and it means just carrying out the action plan with community members, making sure that they continue to be included, and we've made this as easy as possible, hopefully, by including the action tactics that we think would be really good for this step in our guide, along with all the other tactics I've discussed. And those strategies are things that we've seen other cities do that create a tangible output, like a product or an event or something that creates a long-term solution, a potential long-term solution to an issue, just by getting the ball rolling and establishing something that the city can actually see as a success story with residents using open data. So that's the outcome of this step, is that you should be able to see residents using open data. And maybe in our water quality example, that means that residents are actually attending work groups and they actively help the city analyze water quality data. And that does affect the prioritization of how the infrastructure is replaced. And it does actually help neighborhoods that most need it because those people were involved. So that's the potential benefit. Some tactics that I mentioned were these strategies that would help you create something really tangible for the community. You could co-create a data user guide to improve the accessibility of data. That's something we've seen other cities do when users or residents have trouble understanding or using data that you've just put out on your data portal. We've seen Pittsburgh specifically write data user guides that layer on top of the information you're providing as structured data sets, and they could help people understand better understand what you're using that data for in the city and what they could use it for outside of the city. Another thing is challenging residents to develop solutions for the city. So we've seen other cities do this as a data challenge, like you release a data set and challenge residents to contribute solutions using that information. So that's really putting the creativity in your city to work. And the important part of this step is taking those solutions and creating an actionable plan for how to implement them once you've found that they're actually solutions that the community wants to see. So that is another strategy for creating a tangible impact. A final tactic that we suggest here, but of course there are more in the guide, developing custom data sets for partners that need it might be an option if you, for example, do all of your interviews and collect all your feedback and you find that people really want to be, people in the housing development industry, for example, might really want to be using your data, but you're not providing just right data fields. And maybe that's an opportunity to create something where if you just provided that little extra information, then that would go a long way for the people who you have worked with on developing this solution. So I will pause here and take any questions from anyone about the process itself. I'll give everyone a couple more seconds if you want to type something into the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask vocally.
Katya, I'm a plant, but I have one question, and that's just: is the process that you just went over, is that going to be the same and aligned with the beta version of the guide that's out right now?
Oh, that's a good point, Stephen. As Noelle mentioned early on in our presentation, we released a guide for feedback in March, and we got a ton of feedback, which informed this presentation, but we haven't yet released the updated guide, so you can stay tuned for the updated version. It will include our updated process steps, so they'll look a little bit different from the first guide, but our overall concepts, our goals here are still the same. Okay, if there are no more questions, we can move on.
I do have a question.
I will pass it off. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I had the hand raise thing. I don't know if that does anything or not. So here in Gilbert, we have something that we colloquially refer to as the HOA effect, where when we have like community meetings or where meetings are scheduled, you kind of get like the same people over and over and over again, and they tend to be the people that, you know, aren't necessarily the ones that would be the most impactful to be involved in decisions. They're typically the ones that, you know, don't work and don't necessarily have like technical skill to go along with the actual use of your data, and they just tend to be the people that complain the most rather than the ones that are actually you know, well engaged, I guess. So do you have any suggestions for maybe how to market or how to reach out to people that maybe would be more beneficial for data use and data engagement rather than that typical HOA community, or, you know, the groups that wouldn't necessarily impact this data engagement in a positive way?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I will try to tie this into the process and tactics so that it's pretty clear how this is incorporated in the guide. But I would say that in the first two steps, I alluded to some tactics that are, of course, in more detail in the guide, but some tactics that will help you find and refine opportunities by reaching out to existing partners. And I think my suggestion in this case would be to lean on those anchor institutions that do have strong roots in the community. And I mean, it's good that you recognize that the people that are immediately at your front door are not necessarily the people who you want to be involved in conversations about how to inspire change in the community. But I do think that leveraging your partnerships and reaching out to whoever you can at universities, at community organizations, or at various service providers, those people do have access to the people who you likely want to engage. And I think engaging them early on around what issues are important, and maybe in the first step of the process, would be a way to drill down into who those stakeholders are later on. So maybe in the first step, you would reach out to them and convene a bunch of them and say, how can we frame an issue, or what issue is important to the people in the community that you're accessing? And then in the refining stage, maybe actually go out and try to find those stakeholders that your partner has identified and figure out how the city can engage with them more directly. So that would be my suggestion. But I think if you want to talk in more detail about strategies that would work for Gilbert specifically, we can also definitely do that.
Awesome, thank you.
Someone else had another question here. What is your advice for cities without a lot of time or staff on the most effective use of the guide? I think that's a really great question, because it is really important to recognize. We obviously come across this all the time when we're working with cities on open data programs. I think that it's extremely important to recognize that there is not always a way to do a very intensely or resource-intensive project in a city. And you don't need to use this guide to solve homelessness, but you can pick out a slice of the problem that is manageable. And the way that I'd suggest doing that is by building off of work that you're already doing. So we see this approach as something that can add more value to initiatives that the city already has. So if, for example, your city has an initiative on addressing blight, then there's a really easy way for this guide to plug in, and that means exploring that issue in more detail and then starting to drill down. Leveraging the activities that you had already planned for that initiative and adding on some community-driven elements, so that throughout you have the input of the community, and by the end of it, you can at least say that this project will drive the value of open data. And that will be a value add in and of itself, in addition to driving forward the initiative that your city has identified. Does anyone else who might want to try and answer that question about how to deal with the problem of limited time and staff?
I think one of the things that I've found with the smaller cities that we've worked with is that they actually have an opportunity to work over a longer period of time and more into the open space. We really get to learn about the city more and how they're taking a phased approach into implementing their open data program. So while you might think you might not have the time, a bunch of time and resources, in many ways you also have a sort of stable culture within City Hall, a stable environment within city government, and also more space in many ways to conduct these activities. So while we were talking about the sort of certain time frame, this time frame can actually be adaptable to your current situation and provide you the opportunity to really do something even better than what we're talking about right now.
Yep. Thanks for that. I think that's a really important point. Is there any more questions? Okay, I think we'll just move forward. I'll pass it off to Noel to go through our example of this approach being used.
So yeah, we had in Glendale, Arizona. We had, thank you to all the folks in Glendale.
Oh, I'm sorry. We had another question, and I do want to get to it. Do you think?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We did have another question that said, my city is in the early stages of developing our data analytics strategy, which will include open data, but we don't yet have an open data policy. The idea is to build our internal capacity with data sharing before we roll it out publicly. Our objective is to make the data we share usable and relevant to residents, not just data sets how we publish on our future open data portal. How can we start the engagement process now to be successful later on? I think that's a really awesome question, and it's I think very forward thinking to recognize that the data that you share needs to be usable and relevant, and that it's not necessarily a race to post the most data sets, but rather to make those really helpful to the public. I think our suggestion, as with many of these projects that we hope will move forward with tactical data engagement, are to start small. I would maybe say that even if you don't yet have a policy or internal capacity with data sharing, it's never a bad idea to choose a focus area that you might be interested in, and then start having conversations with stakeholders in a more limited way so that you can start getting out into the community and seeing opportunities. So I think narrowing down to a focus area might be a good first step as far as what might be usable. And then moving forward with the approach in that way. I don't think it's necessarily limited to cities that have a policy or to cities that have huge internal data capacity, because the idea is that even just the information that you're presenting in a data set is valuable to residents, even if it's not about like helping them to analyze that data. It's about getting the information that comes from that data into their hands so that they can do something that they're interested in the community.
I did hear a bit of background noise, so if everyone can check, see if they're muted or not, that would be great. Another to actually follow up with what you were saying, which is completely awesome. And one way you can do it is to tie it more directly to maybe issues of concern around in the city. So, for example, if you know your city has tax collection problems, it would be great to maybe just throw out a data set around trash collection, or to throw out maybe some how open data relates to certain initiatives that the city has going on already. Another way to facilitate engagement is to actually directly ask citizens, what data would you like us to produce? So eventually, whenever we do put this data online, ask them directly, either on your social media, on your city website, in meetings where you know people are gathered. Hey, we're working on this open data project. What would you like us to put out? Many ways of tactical data engagement is actually directly dealing with and talking to citizens about what they need and what they would like from the city in terms of the data that they would like to see. So it's great that you're actually thinking about the engagement process already, and it actually shows that you're already in the right mind place for it.
One other thing I'll say about that, this is Stephen, also from the Sunlight team. Noel's about to talk about some of our pilot work in Glendale, and this question actually pretty well describes what the situation was on the ground in Glendale when we started. Which is that the city was in the early stages of developing a strategy and a policy. They didn't have a policy at all. They don't have an open data portal. And actually, as you'll see, one of the tactics we employed was looking at records requests to see where is the demand for information that the city has, and then interviewing some of the most frequent record requesters. And some of the insights we're getting from the frequent records requesters are actually helping to inform not just what data goes out and not just solving a specific problem, but the city's overall strategy to sharing data, or to kind of designing their open data policy as well. When it comes to kind of getting input on a policy itself, many at Sunlight have lots of great approaches to that, and we've got a lot of good research on what we're calling open data crowd law. So I think we'd be happy to follow up offline on any of those questions as well.
Great. And thanks for the segue, Stephen. And in many ways, it's Glendale. A lot of the questions that were asked is very relevant in the pilot of TDE that we conducted in Glendale. It's great that we have this guide, but we actually have the opportunity to put these things in action. And so we can definitely learn a lot from what we've learned in Glendale so far. So, excuse me. So in Glendale, the first thing that we did is engage in the finding stage. The finding stage is all about identifying opportunities for reuse or use of data by the community. In Glendale, we found those opportunities for use with our champion in the records department by analyzing frequent records requests. What we found is that development services such as are highly sought after, so things like permits, code violations, certificate of occupancy, environmental assessments. We're able to boil down that data to identify about 13 or so frequent requesters of that data from the Department of Public Services. And from that, we found that with the city that if we focus on that, there's an opportunity to focus on development services data because of the public records data. We found that it was something where there was a significant amount of value there. So in the next phase, we engaged in the refining stage, which we used to convert the focus area into an opportunity statement. So that statement is sort of the overall sort of guide or theme that we use to help city identify a plan of action. So to do that, we developed a survey for the frequent requesters, and then after that, we developed the survey. We actually interviewed those frequent requesters about the records that they were requesting and the experience of obtaining those records from the city of Glendale, and whether or not the proactive release of data would benefit them and the community overall. So in this instance, Sunlight was working as a third-party mediator to get that feedback and then provide some insights to the city about obtaining public records. And we helped the city gather insights that would help them convert that into a plan of action that they can move forward with in regards to their open data program. So what did we get from, what insights did we get from interviewing stakeholders? What we've seen is that, from interviewing the stakeholders, is that better and easier access to property data will help the stakeholders do their jobs and do their work better. One of the more interesting and more direct ways that this was put to me, actually, when it was in an interview, is that during one of our interviews, was that almost every request is a loan or that will lead to the purchase of a property. In many ways, you can actually translate that even further. Every request, that purchase of a property was a new business, that purchase of a property was a new home, that purchase of a property was a new opportunity for the city of Glendale to be better overall. And so we boiled it down to a core observation was that access to information is a signal for business friendliness and a critical part of economic development for the city of Glendale. We also interviewed other stakeholders who weren't involved in other states, so people like journalists, residents of the city, and overall they also said that better access to this property data will actually help them do their work better, and as a result improve the city of Glendale better. So one of the core and one of the overarching themes from all our work so far is that the city overall, the community overall, will benefit from better access to this particular type of data. So after doing the finding stage, identifying where we should focus on, then focusing, and then converting that into refining that even further, we came up with this opportunity statement that real estate businesses and those associated with those businesses use property data to produce documentation, approve loans, and encourage real estate development. So there's a key opportunity for open data to help real estate businesses more quickly approve transactions. So that means quicker transactions to facilitate new businesses, new homes, and new opportunities for the city of Glendale. So we're now shifting to this planning and implementation phase. So we're thinking of ideas of how to convert what we've learned into an action, a specific action that the city will take on. So for example, one of the ideas we tossed around was a one-stop shop portal just specifically for city property data. Another is to develop something like a data user guide or something that provides additional context so that people who are looking for that data, who obtain that data, will have a good understanding of the data that comes. So along with the benefit for the community, there are actually benefits for the city itself in terms of engaging in TDE. So what will your city get from TDE? One is that by engaging in this type of engagement, you'll be able to generate or facilitate better support for leadership. One of our stakeholder in Glendale, our champion in Glendale, Jean, she noted that when she had this information, it would be easier to sell her bosses on obtaining resources for the open data program when you can tie the open data itself to an actual concrete phenomenon that's going on in your city that will actually help and develop the city overall. It actually has a similar effect in terms of city staff as well. When city staff are able to recognize that the open data or the data that the city is putting out, it actually will help them do their jobs better and help them improve, work on it, improve the city itself and help them on an issue that they're working on closely. It definitely gets them excited about open data as well. And lastly, one of the things that we also noticed is that there are many different angles when it comes to property data. Like we mentioned, there was people in the real estate business, but it was also journalists and citizens overall. But what this exercise has taught us is that if you put open data out there, it provides an opportunity for everyone to join on sort of one point and recognize and bring everyone together around bettering the city of Glendale. And open data was a great way to open data and tactical data engagement was a great way to bring everyone together on issues in the community. So the last thing we do definitely want to leave this with when we do talk about Glendale is that from what we noticed is that you can do this too. So hopefully you can take some encouragement from what we've shown you so far, and we'll definitely be updating you on our work after that.
So I do want to open up the floor and see if anyone has any examples of this kind of work being done in your city, whether you felt it was successful. If you could take a moment to just read over these questions, you can either unmute yourself or chat in the group chat. has your city had any success in engaging residents in discussing open data? Do people use your open data, and how? Does your city collect feedback on open data? And what kind of barriers, cultural or technical, have you faced in promoting open data? Have residents made helpful tools using your open data? We want to hear kind of where you stand and what your starting point is for this work. And we do also, I should note that we want this to be a discussion, so if you just have a question or want to throw something out there, feel free to do that. Tim Moreland says, we've had success with doing open data preview days when providing a new open data set. That's a great idea. I think giving residents an opportunity to, I agree with Steven. Tell us more, Tim. We've seen some, sorry, go ahead.
So it was a fire data set, so we hadn't released fire data before. We thought we'd done a pretty good job of releasing information about our fire incidents, but when we previewed it with kind of our civic tech community, they identified, certain fields that were confusing to them, that had codes they didn't understand, and additional supporting data sets like locations of fire stations and other things that we didn't include as part of it. And then we found some interesting kind of errors or potential errors with the data set. So that was all done, just with a short meeting with some local civic tech folks and looking at the data set, and I think it helped us create a more useful and usable data set after the end.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have plans to do this with every, do you plan to do this around issues, or how do you plan to do this moving forward, the same kind of event?
Yeah, right now it's just kind of ad hoc. When there's a new data set we think the community would be interested in, we'll roll it out related to that. So we're part of, when we have some data about our practice of policing, use of force, and things like that, we're probably going to use a similar model. And then I think there's a new public art data set that's going through our workflow right now that I think would be another good candidate to see what do people.
Sure, yeah. Are you choosing which data sets to release based on your technical capacity, or is it as they become clean you release them, or how are you choosing which data sets to release?
We have an internal prioritization process. It typically has to do
great.
What kind of flows to the top from internal needs. We don't have a good prioritization process to get a sense for what the community wants. So that's why I'm excited to kind of get some ideas from the guide on that.
Sure, yeah. I think one really helpful tactic that might help you is establishing a place where you can go to get that kind of feedback. It doesn't necessarily need to be at the preview days, but it seems like since that's already an event that works, maybe there's something you can add and layer on top of that standing meeting that would be like a feedback channel, either a comment form or a hotline or something that you release. One thing that we've seen work is user groups, so that the same kinds of people get invited to check the data sets, but also by having user groups in public places. For example, the example that we know of is at a library. There's an opportunity to widen the range of people who are commenting. So there are small things you can do to kind of improve the feedback channels that you're creating by engaging with the community, and that way you can kind of narrow down your activity to make sure, I think that this would fall under the refining process that we described, but narrow down the opportunity that you're seeing into something that maybe would really specifically apply to something that is an expressed need in the community. But I think that's great. You're already at a really good starting point. Yeah, the library example we really like as well, particularly because it is a neutral space that kind of provides a third party to mediate the conversation between the city and residents. And it also is librarians can help you. They can help you reach out to people who maybe are interested but don't necessarily know what they could get out of fire data or whatever else you're releasing. Any other comments or thoughts from people? Okay, we can move on. If anyone has any more comments.
I'm really curious if some of our city folks on the phone have data that they either know is being used, but they don't know how, or maybe the opposite of that. They have data that they wish were being used, but they don't think anyone is using it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So just to reiterate Stephen's question, he's wondering whether people have data that they wish were being used, but they don't know if it is, or you know that a certain data set is being used, maybe from like download metrics on your website, but you don't know what people are using it for. I'll give everyone a minute to think. Okay, well, I can maybe move on temporarily, but I'll keep an eye on the chat in case anyone thinks of anything, and please feel free to jump in and just say, you know, I remembered this or that. We'll come back to it at the end if we have time. So just moving forward a little bit, we want to provide you an actionable way to move forward with this. We are working off of a workshop that we did at What Works Cities on Tour in Scottsdale, and Derek notes that his back is in this photo. We had a really good time. We shared an activity to help cities start brainstorming ways to use this process to engage communities. So this was supposed to be kind of just idea generation, starting with the principles of this approach, not strictly trying to plan how to carry out the process, but thinking about, do I have the elements of what might make this work, and what kind of ideas do I have about what might be good for the community. So some questions that we included in this activity were thinking about data supply. Do you have relevant data, like Stephen said, that people just aren't using, data that you wish would be used? What department has that data? Could the city collect more data around that one data set? You know, like really dig into what the situation is with data that you want to get out there. Another question we asked was about data requesters. Have certain people consistently ask for data? Why are they asking for it? How can you know what they're using it for? And start thinking about how your data supply, the data sets that you do have, can support those community members, and like what can you add to what they're getting from the city. Another question, kind of to get the framework or the groundwork for what your city is doing. How have you released data or connected with potential data users in the past? So do you have a public records request system? How are people receiving the data from that system? Do you get any feedback on whether or not it was helpful? How has it been used? And what gaps exist in meeting the external demand for that kind of data? And then finally, we asked participants what tactics they might want to use in order to engage people more to identify those specific opportunities. So what kind of tactics would work for your city as far as going out into the community and asking more detailed questions? And at the activity, we provided a menu of tactics, but we're happy to do that. If you're interested, please follow up with us. So ask us about tactical data engagement. If you'd like more detail about the brainstorming activity, we can send you the activity and the menu of tactics that we provided to the participants and walk you through kind of why that might help you get the wheels turning, have some ideas about how you might apply tactical data engagement in your city. And I know many of you that have spoken up may have ideas, and this might seem like it's pretty general, but we're very, very amenable to working on how to refine this to your needs. And we think that this is such an adaptable approach that there really is a way to fit everything into activities that you're already doing. So please do reach out if you're interested in getting our help on how to refine what your city might do. If your city focuses on innovating around community engagement, if community engagement is a really important issue for your city, then this is a really obvious great approach for you to try out, because we hope that it will add a little bit more punch to the community engagement efforts that you're already undertaking. If you're ready to uncover residents' open data stories, if you just want to know how people are using your information, this would be a great thing to do. And generally, just if you want to get started, please reach out. Our emails are at the bottom of this page, and we're, of course, available through What Works Cities, anyone on the Sunlight team. Finally, I will suggest that you go read our beta guide if you haven't already. As Stephen pointed out, there is a new update coming that will look like this slide deck. And so you have the most up-to-date information as of now, and you can look out for that guide. You can look out for that guide in a couple of weeks.
And actually, I'll say a quick word on that. I accidentally sent our current working draft of that guide to everybody. A few of you have requested access, and we're all about transparency here at Sunlight. So I think I'm happy to grant view access if people want to watch us work on it. But do know that we're going to be in the midst of updating that guide.
Yep. Okay, thanks everybody. I will, I guess we have a couple of more minutes so we can come back to any questions anyone has. Open Stephen is trending. Any questions or thoughts, any examples from your city that you can share with the group? We really do want to make sure that everyone is sharing ideas between each other. We think it's a great opportunity for cities to build off of each other's work. So if you have any thoughts, please jump in. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Again, this is something that we are really, really excited about, and hope you're excited about as well. Feel free to reach out to us. But thank you for taking the time to sit with us and hear about tactical engagement. Feel free to reach out to us again, and thanks. Have a nice day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.